Okay, today we're going to be reading Lord of the Flies in Chapter 3. Let's see what our aim is. The aim is, how do Ralph and Jack feel about each other in this scene? Here we have Ralph with the conch and our red-headed hunter, Jack. Remember, this is the scene where Jack comes back from the forest and he still hasn't caught the pig, and Ralph and Jack are kind of arguing about priorities on the island. Ralph's priorities are shelter and rescue, and Jack's priority is hunting. The vocabulary word we'll encounter in this chapter, in this scene, is opaque. Opaque means unclear, not letting light through. It's an adjective. So, for example, this glass is opaque, you can't quite see through it. And these tights, I'm sure you've heard of opaque tights, you can't see through them. In this chapter, though, opaque is going to be used figuratively, so it's going to mean unclear, not clear, not literally unclear. Follow along as I read on page 53, starting where Ralph says, where Jack says, only I know how they feel. See, that's all. Jack is explaining that he understands how the little kids feel, how they're afraid, because he's afraid in the forest when he hunts. Okay, and Ralph, hearing all this business about being afraid in the forest, where we're going to start reading, basically just ignores it and says, the best thing we can do is get ourselves rescued. Ralph is single-minded in the one priority, which is getting himself and the rest of the boys rescued. Jack had to think for a moment before he could remember what rescue was. Rescue? Oh, yes, of course. All the same, I'd like to catch a pig first. He snatched up his spear and dashed it into the ground. The opaque, mad look came into his eyes again. Ralph looked at him critically through his tangle of fair hair. So long as your hunters remember the fire. You and your fire! That's Jack. The two boys trotted down the beach and, turning at the water's edge, looked back at the pink mountain. The trickle of smoke sketched a chalky line up the solid blue of the sky, wavered high up and faded. Ralph frowned. I wonder how far off you could see that. Miles. We don't make enough smoke. The bottom part of the trickle, as though conscious of their gaze, thickened to a creamy blur, which crept up the feeble column. So they're watching the smoke rise on the mountain as they're walking along the beach. They've put on green branches, muttered Ralph. I wonder. He screwed up his eyes and swung round to search the horizon. What's Ralph wondering here? He's wondering, can a boat actually see them? Got it! That's Jack. Jack shouted so loudly that Ralph jumped. What? Where? Is there a ship? But Jack was pointing to the high declivities that led down from the mountain to the flatter part of the island. Of course! They'll lie up there. They must, when the sun's too hot. Who lies up there when the sun's too hot? What's Jack thinking about? The pig. Ralph gazed bewildered at his rapt face. They get up high up and in the shade, resting during the heat, like cows at home. I thought you saw a ship. We could steal up on one, paint our faces so they wouldn't see, perhaps surround them, and then... Indignation took away Ralph's control. I was talking about smoke. So you want to be rescued? All you could talk about is pig, pig, pig. But we want meat. And I work all day with nothing but Simon, and you come back and don't even notice the huts. I was working too. But you like it, shouted Ralph. You want to hunt, while I... They faced each other on the bright beach, astonished at the rub of feeling. Ralph looked away first, pretending interest in a group of little uns on the sands. From beyond the platform came the shouting of the hunters in the swimming pool. On the end of the platform, Piggy was lying flat, looking down into the brilliant water. People don't help much. He wanted to explain how people were never quite what you thought they were. Simon, he helps. He pointed at the shelters. All the rest rushed off. He's done as much as I have, only Simon's always about. What does that mean, Simon's always about? It means he's always wandering around. You never quite find him. Ralph started back to the shelters with Jack by his side. "Too a bit for you," muttered Jack, "before I have to bathe." "Don't bother." But when they reached the shelters, Simon was not to be seen. Ralph put his head in the hole, withdrew it, and turned back. "He's buzzed off." "Got fed up," said Jack, "and gone for a bathe." Ralph frowned. "He's queer. He's funny." Jack nodded, as much for the sake of agreeing as anything, and by tacit consent they left the shelter and went toward the bathing pool. "And then," said Jack, "when I've had a bath and something to eat, I'll just trek over to the other side of the mountain and see if I can find any traces. Coming?" "But the sun's nearly set. I might have time." They walked along, two continents of experience and feeling, unable to communicate. "If I could only get a pig." "I'll come back and go on with the shelter." They looked at each other, baffled, in love and in hate. All the warm salt water of the bathing pool and the shouting and splashing and laughing were only just sufficient to bring them together again. So I want you to think, first of all, about the aim, which is, how do these boys feel about each other in the scene? What's happening between them? What's going on between these two boys who really are good friends, but something is happening between them. I want you to think about that. Um, and the thinking question is, if you look back at the text that we just read, what metaphor does the author use to describe how Jack and Ralph feel about each other in this scene? So if you could figure out how they feel about each other and look back at the text, then you might be able to find a metaphor, something that the author is comparing Ralph and Jack to describe how they're feeling in this scene. Think about it, and we'll talk about it tomorrow.